what's he actually like, Robert? Is he going to be a good king?
Well, I hope he listens
difficult, doesn't
he's tricky. I think that there's no doubt that the king used to get on better with Harry.
Really?
There's
Why do you say that?
That's what I understand to be the truth. I mean, I think that the people that know them well said that was part of the heartbreaking side of this whole fallout was that the king and Harry should sort of see eye to eye more. They used to have more time. They used to get each other more. Whereas I think with William and the king, there's always been clashes over the ivory in the royal collection, and clashes over just little things.
The appearance of George, I remember in a photograph on a desk they had a massive row about that.
He can be quite, not controlling, but he's a bit tricky. He's got a bit of a temper.
Well, you use the following words to describe William. You say he's occasionally been over-assertive, can be difficult to handle, with aides approaching sensitive matters carefully. Yeah. Despite his public composure, insiders describe William as prone to mood swings.
I think that's fair, as I wrote it. But also, I think that if you go and speak to a few people off the record, they would say that's probably being generous.
They've said it, finally, out loud. Two of the most plugged-in royal correspondents in Britain sat down for a conversation that royal watchers have been waiting years for, and they didn't hold back. If you have ever felt like the story you were being sold about the Sussexes and the royal family didn't quite add up, today's video is going to feel like a long exhale, because Rob Jobson and Camilla Tominey, names that carry serious weight in royal reporting, just said the quiet part out loud in a Telegraph exchange that's sending ripples through royal circles. And if you're already subscribed to Sussex Strong, you already know we've been saying this for years. Today, we're breaking down exactly what was said, why it matters, why the timing of this admission is anything but accidental, and why this might be the first real crack in a narrative that's been held together with tape and silence for the better part of a decade. Before we get into it, if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because we cover the stories the mainstream royal rota won't touch with a 10-foot pole. We slam the critics, we call out the double standards, and we do it with receipts, not vibes. Let's get into it. For years, the narrative around the royal family has been carefully managed, almost engineered, honestly. We've been told again and again, on repeat, in every tabloid column and every glossy magazine spread, that Harry is the disruptor, the outsider, the one who walked away and single-handedly broke the family unit. We've been fed a story where Meghan is painted as the architect of every rift, the outsider who came in and supposedly poisoned the well, and Harry as either a victim of her influence or a willing participant in tearing the family apart. And through all of that noise, through all of those headlines, one name has conveniently, suspiciously stayed out of the crossfire. One person has been protected, shielded, cushioned from scrutiny at every single turn, no matter what gets reported behind the scenes. William. Now, according to this exchange between Jobson and Tominey, the conversation shifted in a way that's genuinely rare for royal commentary, the kind of shift that makes you sit up and actually pay attention. Instead of the usual routine, the tired routine, of picking apart Harry and Meghan's every move, dissecting a handhold here or a Netflix trailer there, the discussion turned towards something far more uncomfortable for the palace machine. The idea that Harry actually gets on well with his father. That the relationship between Harry and King Charles isn't the broken, irreparable, headline-friendly mess the tabloids love to paint for clicks. And if that's true, if father and son can still find common ground despite everything, despite the distance, despite the years, then the question becomes obvious, unavoidable, impossible to dodge. If it's not Charles standing in the way of reconciliation, then who is? The correspondents pointed, whether directly or by implication, toward William. And that's the sentence royal reporters have avoided writing for years. The sentence that's been sitting there unspoken in every newsroom, because criticising the heir to the throne isn't just risky, It's practically taboo in traditional royal media. Nobody wants to be the reporter who loses access. Nobody wants to be the one blacklisted from Kensington Palace briefings, cut off from the next big exclusive, frozen out of the circle. So instead, for years, the narrative default has been simple, almost lazy in its predictability. Blame the spare, protect the heir. Rinse and repeat. Let's talk about that double standard because it's the actual heartbeat of this entire story. The thing that ties every headline together once you start looking for it. Harry left the traditional royal fold, and every single decision he made afterward has been scrutinized under a microscope so intense it would make anyone crack. Every interview, every documentary, every book excerpt has been treated as evidence of betrayal, dissected line by line for signs of disloyalty. Meanwhile, when it comes to William, there's an entirely different set of rules in play, a softer set, a quieter set. Reports of tension, reports of coldness, reports of an increasingly rigid and controlled public image, these get softened, reframed, or quietly dropped from the conversation altogether, buried on page 9 instead of splashed across the front cover. Why? Because William is going to be king. And the institutions that surround the monarchy, the correspondents, the editors, the palace press offices, they all understand something very simple. Access is currency. If you're the journalist who writes the piece suggesting the future king has an anger problem, you're not getting invited back. You're not getting the next exclusive sit-down. You're not getting the phone call when there's a story to leak. So the machine protects itself, and in protecting itself, it protects William. Even when the very same journalists, privately, off the record, over drinks after the briefing, acknowledge that there's more to the story than what makes it to print. This is exactly the pattern we've highlighted here on Sussex Strong from day one, the pattern we built this channel around exposing. Harry shows up to give an honest, sometimes painfully candid account of his experience, and he's branded as bitter, ungrateful, disloyal, difficult. Meanwhile, the person allegedly holding the family hostage to old grudges gets a pass because the institution needs him to look untouchable, needs him to look stable, needs him to look like the safe, steady future. That's not journalism holding power accountable. That's journalism protecting power. And there's a difference, a huge difference, between the two. Here's what makes this moment so significant, so worth talking about today. Harry has, by most accounts, approached the idea of reconciliation with something the royal family rarely rewards, and almost seems allergic to: emotional honesty. He's spoken about missing his family. He's spoken about wanting his children to know their English relatives, to have that connection even from a distance. He's shown time and again a willingness to meet his father halfway, even after everything that's been thrown at him publicly, even after the headlines that would make most people slam the door shut for good. Contrast that with the picture now emerging around William, a picture of someone reportedly unwilling to engage, unwilling to soften, holding on to old resentments in a way that a future monarch, frankly, might not be able to afford long term. Because here's the thing about being king one day: the public will eventually expect maturity, stability, grace under pressure, the ability to rise above old family drama for the sake of the institution. If the reporting suggests a pattern of anger and rigidity now, while he's still just heir, that's a conversation worth having honestly, out in the open, not buried under decades of no comment, and carefully managed photo ops designed to project calm. And that's really the crux of what Jobson and Tominey seem to be gesturing toward, whether they meant to open this door as wide as they did or not. It's time for royal media to stop performing a script written to protect the throne and start reporting what multiple sources within their own circles apparently already know, have known for years, and have simply chosen not to say out loud until now. Timing matters here too, and we can't ignore that. This conversation is happening at a moment when public sentiment toward the monarchy is shifting, quietly but unmistakably. Younger audiences are far less deferential toward royal tradition and far more interested in accountability, authenticity, and fairness across the board. The old model, where the heir gets protected no matter what, and the spare gets sacrificed for headlines whenever a story is needed, doesn't hold up the way it used to. Audiences are asking harder questions, sharper questions. They're asking, if Harry can be this open about his flaws and his growth, why can't the same standard be applied evenly across the family? Why does honesty get punished on one side and rewarded with silence on the other? That's the real story buried inside this exchange. Not just who's to blame for the family rift, that's the surface-level question, the lazy headline. The real question is, why has the blame always been distributed so unevenly? And once you start asking that question, really sitting with it, you start seeing the pattern everywhere, in headlines, in unnamed palace sources, in convenient leaks that always seem to land right after Harry does something the institution doesn't like, almost like clockwork. So where does this leave us? If insiders and correspondents are now willing to say, even carefully, even with all the usual hedging royal reporters use to protect themselves, that reconciliation isn't being blocked by Charles, and that Harry has shown a genuine willingness to rebuild bridges, then the pressure shifts. It shifts onto the palace to explain why the relationship between the brothers remains frozen solid. It shifts onto William to either respond to this reporting or continue to let the silence speak for itself. And silence, as we've seen time and again, tends to speak volumes. And it shifts onto royal media as a whole to decide whether they're going to keep protecting the institution at the expense of the truth, or whether moments like this Telegraph exchange mark the beginning of a more honest era of royal reporting, one where the heir doesn't get an automatic pass just because of what he's destined to become. We'll be watching closely, because if there's one thing we've learned covering this story, day in and day out, it's that these things rarely stay quiet for long. Once one crack appears in the narrative, once one respected correspondent says the thing everyone's been thinking, more tend to follow. This won't be the last we hear about it, not by a long shot. And that's where we're going to leave it for today. If this video gave you the clarity you've been looking for, do us a favour. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling us what you think is really going on behind palace walls, and if you haven't already, subscribe to Sussex Strong. We're the channel that isn't afraid to ask the questions the royal rota won't, and we'll keep bringing you the analysis, the context, and the accountability that this story deserves. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update, because, trust me, this story is far from over. Until next time, stay sharp, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next one.